Welcome to the full guide on how to make hard bounce, Franck, 240 KMH, Ueberrest, this style. I'm going to be using a template here that I've made. It's available at the top of the description on my website in my definitive hard bounce pack. This is a huge sample pack with a bunch of loops, MIDI, presets, and Ableton files, plus some extra drum samples and serum presets. The link for that's at the top of the description on my website, and I've got a $20 off coupon code for YouTube people only, so use that while it's available. Thanks for the support, guys, and let's get started. Alright, so we are at 165 BPM. Now, I've noticed the real hard bounce tracks tend to happen between 160 and 170 BPM. You can maybe go down to like 155, but I feel like any lower than that, and it kind of just starts to become like hard trance or something like that for that real like hard bounce sound. These are all in the 160s. You really get that speed. And it's a certain groove that happens with the bass line as well. So, we're starting up here with the kick. I've got this pretty hard kick. You can see I made it a little bit shorter. I think it's really important to make sure the length of your kick and your bass, they don't clash. Like if the kick is too long, hear how even that tiny bit of difference, the kick tail is kind of going into the bass. And when it's happening so fast like this, you just really want a shorter kick. So I've got that one. And then this roar. You can see the difference when I turn it on. Again, without it. With it. This is the perfect way to add a bit of punch to your kick. People like to try compression and drum bus and all this different stuff, but if you just basically have a little bit of distortion on just the mids and highs in a very particular way, you can really just get that kind of punch that you want, right? Like that's it at 100%. You can hear it's just adding straight up, just click to the mids. I've got this fractal here on the mids, and you can see by bringing this low, by default it's there, and check out how it sounds. And then I brought it up, so it goes from this to this. Right, it's focusing it, so this is just going to really hit that mid-range where you really need it to be. And then also the highs have got this soft shaper. So yeah, you hit the mids and highs with a bit of this, there's nothing on the lows, and then you just use the dry wet a little bit. That's basically like the sauce on this. You can also remove some of the compression if you want, but you don't necessarily need to. And also sometimes even bringing up that drive there can be nice as well. It just depends on your track, right? Then we got our bass, which is 3 layers. Starting with the first layer, this is kind of like the main sub sort of bass. What we're doing here is we have this square 32 inside of operator. Where you can see it's a square wave, but it's only 32%, or it's like a little bit of the harmonics. It's not the full like square wave. Like if I turn that, see what I'm saying? Also, I've got this phase retrigger on, very important, because if you turn that off, see how the sound changes ever so slightly on each bass? And really what happens is like the low end will be a lot less steady, right? If you keep this, it basically sets it at the same spot on the waveform every time, and you get a really steady bass. Then we're doing a little bit of FM from the sine wave. So you hear when we bring that in, and it's an octave down, so it already just makes this a bit deeper. It's kind of a cool way to have your sound like at 1 octave, and then bring it a little bit lower without like if you bring this all the way down, see, you lose a lot of that low end. But if you have this FM from an oscillator that's an octave down, it can add in some of that lower overtone, but it's not gonna like ruin the actual low end of the bass. And that's got the phase retrigger on as well. Then we've got a low pass filter with an envelope and also a little bit of resonance. So you see it's this really short envelope, again, because we're moving so fast and you really want this to jump off the kick. Super short envelope is needed. A little bit of resonance helps too with the low end. It gives you a little bit more sub bass, funny enough. If I turn that down, See, it kind of makes the bass a little bit fatter. So definitely don't be afraid to play with that without using too much. We got this layer. Like a classic Donk sort of bass. So what we're doing is we're creating this with operator. We got that same square 32 and then a sine wave. But what we're doing with the sine wave is we're creating like this. It's an octave up this time, and it's got a really short envelope, so it makes this like punchy hit. And then we got the low pass filter like that. So it's like a bit more envelope. And you just get this. Then we have a little bit of reverb. And then a high pass filter because you really just want that mid-range and high. And then an auto pan, which you can hear keeps that reverb out of the way of the kick. And then you layer that with the other bass. Right, and it adds a lot of punch. And then the last layer, which I've heard in a lot of the Ueberrest tracks, right? So what we're doing here is you can see the bass line is this simple thing where it's just hitting D and then goes to D sharp at the end. And this is the same thing, but it's jumping across octaves like this. Like if I turn off the auto pan. Right, so pretty simple stuff. It's just it's the same notes, but just with octaves of it. It's a pretty simple patch. It's 2 saw waves detuned in wavetable. But where it really comes to life, as you can hear, is this roar. So roar isn't just good when it comes to the kicks. It's also really good on these basses because you can kind of like take a pretty basic sound like this and really make it your own and really like get creative with it. Right, I've got this full rectifier, and then I've got a little bit of this soft shaper on the highs, nothing on the lows. And it really brings it to life. The other thing this is really good for too is just making it less muddy, right? Like in the whole mix of the kick and bass. If you get rid of this, it gets buried a bit more. This allows you to really push it and like focus in the mids and highs and make it what you want it to be. We got a high pass filter on that one, and then a bit of auto pan as well. Same deal, so it just doesn't get in the way of the kick. And then we've got our percussion. So, starting with the main drums, we got a nice fat hi-hat that I made very short. Again, just like the bass, you really want this to be just fitting perfectly between those kicks, so you really don't need a very long hi-hat. And then the clap. So a good technique for this is actually taking these like 808, 909 style claps like this and then distorting them a little bit. Ableton pedal is really good for this. Right, because it just makes it a bit more aggressive, and then it's going to sit really, really well in this mix. Then we start moving down to our percussion. So first we've just got this little drum rack. Just like these 2 little hits kind of dancing off each other, but a drum rack can be really good for this because you can kind of like, you know, really work with 2 hits in the same place, right? And just make them really groove. And yeah, they just bounce off that hi-hat a bit. Then we've got some chopped loops. Right, so I have this where I took this little piece of a loop, like a break beat. And then what we're doing is we got a low pass filter with this LFO on it at quarter notes. And then we're distorting that. And you hear the movement on the filter. It kind of like, the overdrive just brings it to life, plus some drum bus. And then we're high passing it so it's like just the top end of it, and then auto pan so it fits underneath the kick. So it kind of adds a bit of movement to the drums. Right, you can hear that. Plus we've got a similar thing going on with these 2 layers. Right, where you can see I've got this one with a bit of distortion and then this auto pan here. Keeps it really tight, as you can see, and then a high pass and a sidechain auto pan. This one, which just kind of like resets over top of that with a little bit of delay and drum bus. We've got this percussion, just like a classic rave loop to kind of fill in the background a little bit and give us some groove, plus a closed hi-hat. Just playing straight 16th notes, but then the side chaining gives it a little bit of groove, right? And then we're also high passing that. Then we've got some screeches. So the first one that just hits at the start of every 4 bars, it's like a bit of punctuation. You can see this is the same note as the basses. That's what you're going to want to do. And the note length with the screeches makes a huge difference too. See, if I just hold that down, it just becomes like a long note, but you can also just, like I've done here, just something really short. And then it just becomes a little stab. This is 2 saw waves, detuned really heavily in opposite directions, and there's some unison. And then the secret to the screech is a little bit of this pitch envelope, but you can see it's like a tiny bit. Like, it's not even on that heavily in the matrix, and then even the envelope doesn't go up that high. That's how you get the screech sound. It's like a very little bit of pitch movement, plus the detune in the oscillators and the unison. We got a bit of overdrive, so without that, with it, right, it really brings out that mid-range and high-end. A bit of reverb, high pass, and then we're sidechaining this to the kick. And then the main screech, it's the same note, right, that the bass was doing and everything, but you can see we're playing with the different octaves on this one really well. Right, you can get a lot of mileage out of this, plus the note length too, like those really short choppy notes and then the slightly longer ones. Now with this one, this is made with analog. So Ableton's analog is like a secret weapon for screeches. It really is. Because what you can do here is you got 2 different pitch envelopes. Like each one of these oscillators has its own pitch envelope just built in. So you can see we got 2 saw waves, super detuned, which like, let me just turn off the pitch envelopes and you can see what that's doing. Right, so already it's super screechy, and then we add some unison, and then we start adding the pitch envelopes. Right, where they're like doing slightly different things, so it just detunes it in an even more kind of crazy, freakish way, and it gets you what you want. We got the amp envelope like that, a bit of reverb, very important for the screeches, high pass filter, and then distortion. And the reason why we do this is because if you distort without that, see, it allows us to focus the distortion just in the mids and highs more, because you're not sending all that low end into the distortion. So it's going to be like a lot cleaner. And then a high pass after, because the distortion does add, you can hear that, a lot of low end. And then we're just sidechaining it to the kick. And then finally, we got some little vocal chops down here. So what I'm doing here is I'm just taking these little pieces of vocals, like I got this one. This just... right? It's going through a bit of delay and high pass, and then the sidechain with the auto pan, and then this one too. Just little pieces, but these little vocal stabs, they're used a lot in these tracks because it kind of gives us something a little more human too. Like without that, it is very just synthy and kind of synthetic. This reminds you like something human in there, especially like the 240 tracks and like Adrian and all those guys. They use a lot of these little vocal stabs. So again, it's just taking little pieces of a vocal and making the note really short too. Like these are just 16th notes in here, and then you get that kind of stabby vocal. A little delay, high pass, and sidechain, and that's all you need. And that is the full guide on how to make a hard bounce track in 2025. Thanks for watching, guys. If you made it to the end, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. Let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said, you can get this template plus 4 more, plus all these MIDI files and synths and drums and presets and loops. Plus, yeah, even these serum presets here are available at the top of the description in the definitive hard bounce pack. Once again, there's a $20 off coupon code, limited time only for YouTube people only, so definitely grab that while it's available. Thanks for the support, guys, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.